Parquet Courts. They're back. 8th album. We've only been really tuned into them since their last one, Wide Awake, in 2018, which I think brought them their most uh, success and critical acclaim to this point. Although, uh, I think they're a group that still kind of resides in that like B tier of like rock, and specifically like I guess they're in like the punk dance rock scene now.
Yeah.
They're kind of hard to like really label them, but a lot of the a lot of the narrative around this album, Sympathy for Life, is about how they're finally embracing dance into
Mm.
their sound, and like uh, using a dub machine to try to build out their sound a little bit more. They were up in the Catskills in New York. Shout out uh, New York greenery and
Hmm.
wilderness, but uh, doing these like long jam sessions that got cut down by their producer to make like these songs. I gotta be honest, I don't find anything on here like super different from Wide Awake, and I don't know if I totally agree with like all the narrative around like how different things are, but I still think there's some songs on here that absolutely slap. I just don't feel like it's as uh I don't think it reaches the highs of Wide Awake consistently.
Hmm.
But how did you feel about Sympathy for Life?
Yeah, I liked it. I guess I share a similar sentiment in the sense that wasn't like super blown away by anything, but I also didn't really dislike anything either. It's pretty good
Mm.
and cool to read, as you said, that they did a lot of this pre-COVID, and as you said, they kind of like chop a lot of this down later and even like change what they want to convey with the songs during quarantine in terms of like a message and stuff. And it's cool to see like the inspiration from like you know uh, club shows and that energy and that scene seems to take a lot of bring a lot of inspiration into the music.
Mm.
Obviously, I don't think when people think of like club music, they don't necessarily think of this, but like I think the energy of going to clubs and like that community is what they're trying to convey a lot. And yeah, so I'd say it's still pretty good. It's better than most rock that I hear these days. I think they're
Sure.
really solid and like they're just jamming out. It's fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this is still a really good album, especially when you're grading on the curve of rock albums nowadays. But I shouted out their producer. I want to make sure I mention his name is Rodide McDonald, and he's worked with like a bunch of really famous people from King Cruel and the XX to Adele and Sampha, and probably more recently people groups like Savages are like at the top of his list there. Also, John Parrish was a producer on this as well, but Rodade was really shouted out by the band as like helping to find the sound amid these long jam sessions that they were doing. Um, yeah, I found the first half of this album to be a little less interesting. Besides I think the first two tracks, "Walking at a Downtown Pace," which the drum in that is just like unbelievable, like really stands out. And then "Black Widow Spider" also brings a lot of energy. But then it's kind of a I found it to be a little more like downbeat than I expected until "Homo Sapien," and then I feel like it really cranks up until the final track. So um, it goes in like ups and downs for me on the album. And again, I think that's why Wide Awake would still be my preferred Parquet Courts album of choice if I had to make one. But what songs stood out to you, or what moments did you like?
Yeah, there were two moments that stood out to me. I liked Plant Life for like the layered vocals that pop up, kind of reminded me like Black MIDI or even like
Mm,
Gorillas from time to time. That combined with like the snare sound really
yep.
cool. And then also towards the end, Trulo, the instrumentation there, just really like funky percussion as well as like fun vocal loops going on. But I really liked all of it.
Yeah. You mentioned Plant Life. Plant Life and Trulo are probably the two songs that sound most like an LCD sound system track to me. Like Trulo almost sounds exactly like Your City's a Sucker to me. But I think you can just hear that like that influence from bands like Air and LCD and groups like that they're probably really listening to. Also, apparently, so the two leads in the group are Brown. I should get his full name. Austin Brown and Andrew Savage, and I can't remember which one, but one of them attributed his inspiration for this album as taking acid and going to the gym. So whenever works, right? Uh, good for them. So we'll be adding some of their tracks to our Nostalgia Best of 2021 playlist. So check that out on Spotify.